Jim, thanks very much for taking time out to have this conversation today.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's really built on the conversations we've had more recently in terms of some of the challenges, but opportunities as well, of age diversity in the workplace and how issues that we see here in the UK are echoed in the US and vice versa. So very common challenges, and sort of titling this conversation Age Diversity Challenges Without Boundaries, because we think that wherever one is located in this world, there's similar challenges of age bias and discrimination. And if we can remove those barriers, if we can make some progress in that diversity and inclusion environment, I think we can have some really positive impact to the working environment.
And help employers realize that there's a lot of value in hiring older workers.
Absolutely. One of the initial challenges that we see, Jim, when we're talking to organisations is actually just to get them to engage in the age diversity agenda. Mm-hmm. There seems to be other priorities that get ahead of ageism. Is that something that you recognise?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen a number of people refer to ageism as the last of the isms to be addressed. They look at racism and sexism and as important as those are, ageism is kind of the poor stepchild, and we're ignored a lot or taken for granted.
Yeah, it's so true. And in the corporate work that we do with our Champion Age Diversity program, it's about encouraging those organisations. The way I would describe it is taking the first step in considering age as a valuable part of that diversity question and conversation.
Yeah, and like I said, really look at the value in older workers and see what they're bringing to the table. And it's not just years of experience. There's a lot more to it that's going on there. There's a lot of value there.
Yeah, and if we can get those multi-generational groups as well, bringing that experience, bringing that know-how to the wider workforce, that's where you start to see real progress in performance, in how the organisation works. I think it creates a better working conditions within those organisations. And actually, there's some data that's available now from various sources that actually say it improves business performance and business output. So a focus towards organisations considering a diverse group of age within the workforce can really be business crucial.
And we ran something the other day that talked about if you're going in for a job interview, talk the language of the employer, and what's their big hot button. They're looking at the bottom line all the time. And if you're looking at older workers, and I can speak from this as my daughter who graduated from college not too many years ago, their placement people were telling the younger people coming into the workforce, you go someplace, you work there 3 to 5 years, move on.
Yeah. And
most of the studies and interviews and surveys that I've seen regarding older people, older job seekers, is that they don't want to look for a job anymore. It's old hat to them. If I'm 55 and I can get a job, I'll work there for 10, 12, 15, or even more years.
Yeah.
And it's so expensive to hire people. So if you've got a young person coming in, no matter how talented they are, if they're going to leave in 3 to 5 years and you have to go back and hire all over again, that gets to be expensive.
I completely understand that, and there was actually some, I think we have it on our website actually, some recognition of some research that's done that showcases how the loyalty of an older worker in terms of being with an organisation, on average, from my memory, of 7 years, whereas a younger worker, on average, will be there for 3 years. So there's actually an economic cost there, isn't there, to that recruitment, that retraining, getting back up to speed. And I think that also looks to debunk one of those myths and perceptions of older workers. That's something actually I want to talk about a bit later as well, in terms of some of those terrible myths that are out there that are actually
Well,
completely untrue. And
there
not
are a number of those.
discussion.
But I was going to say, we saw, and we put in the article that we ran the other day, there was data from SHRM, which is Society of Human Resource Management, and they were estimating that the cost of replacing someone is roughly half of that person's annual salary. So if you have to replace somebody who's earning $70,000 a year, it's going to cost that company $35,000 to replace them. And the higher up you go in the pecking order, up to the C-level positions, that percentage gets higher and higher.
Yeah.
It can be very costly.
It's a very tangible economic value that maybe isn't really considered, when we talk about the whole the age landscape of an organization. So it's an absolute
it's a good tangible number, something.
Yeah, absolutely. So as well as sort of do it, the right thing to do when you're thinking about diversity, there's some real tangible economic benefits as well.
And you talk about the benefits that an older worker brings in experience. That's all true, but that's a hard thing to really pinpoint. It's a hard thing to put your finger on. But a job number like that, when there are dollar figures attached to it, that's something the companies can understand.
Absolutely. And I guess a reason why organisations need to be really thinking about this as well is the changing demographic. Again, not just a UK thing or US thing. I've heard it described as a global mega trend in terms of the changing population in terms of ages. So is that something that you recognise, Jim?
I just saw a study not that long ago that said more than half of Americans 50 and over expect to be working past the age of 70. And I saw a different study that said that people, or the fastest growing age group in the workforce is people 70 and over.
Wow.
Yeah, so they're hanging around, and we're working.
Yeah, and
I'm living proof of that.
There's sort of good sides and bad sides to that, or let's say more challenging sides. I think the good side is people are living longer and healthier, but also some people, there's a fiscal need to work because maybe
some people are working past 65 and 70, not by choice but by need, because they need to.
But also I think another positive is if someone has a self-value, don't they, when they work, so they want to still contribute. It helps their social mobility and I say just keeping the connection, with other people in the workplace, but also
sense of well-being.
Exactly. So it has a really strong ripple effect in terms of wanting to work, needing to work, having to work, but also, as we were saying earlier, about bringing that know-how, that experience, that knowledge to the working environment to add value, not just to be someone who sits there on the production line or whatever, to actually add value to themselves, but also the organisation as well.
Sure, and there's another element to that. If you're a widget maker, okay, you know how to make widgets, but because you worked at other places, you see how other people make widgets.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of knowledge and experience that you can bring to the table as well.
Absolutely, and part of that, the global change of that population is there's a growing change in the customer base as well. So there's older people buying stuff. So I think organisations who are selling stuff have to look at that new consumer base and look at reflecting that maybe with a wider, diverse age group within their own workforce, so that we have better product development, product design, services that match the demands of that different society.
And you can see that just in the way they run their advertising. There are a lot of ads.
Yes.
From companies that, in the big picture, they really appeal to everyone, but they're running ads specifically targeting an older audience.
Yeah, absolutely. To bring the conversation to, the very topical, the whole COVID pandemic situation, which is absolutely affected all four corners of the globe. do you think, has COVID, the pandemic, affected thinking in terms of how organisations think, or the impact actually on individuals and their capacity to work, but also the have more people losing jobs? We hear that, I think, in various government data that's produced. Certainly in the UK, I can refer to some staggering changes in numbers. How's that been? How have you seen that affect, Jim, in the US?
Well, I think the unemployment numbers across the board are up, and correspondingly for older workers, it's gone up as well. And I think there used to be a pretty significant difference between the unemployment rate among people 50 and over and the national average. That gap, I think, has shrunk considerably since last spring. And the percentage of people unemployed over 50 in the U.S. is still below the national average. That gap has shrunk in the last year.
In UK data shows the over 50s cohort, the length of time out of employment is lengthening, and the number of people in that count, if you like, is just unfortunately growing. And looking at some welfare stats just before coming online, actually, the change from last March when the first UK lockdown happened, the number of over 50s people claiming welfare has more than doubled, unfortunately. So I think the pandemic has definitely, obviously, had an impact on all age groups, to be honest. All age groups and all protected characteristic groups are suffering because of the pandemic in terms of their careers and working life. But I think that there is definite signs that the older end of the age group have been adversely affected to a great deal.
Yeah, well, I've noticed. Well, you mentioned the length of time that people are over 50 are unemployed, and we just ran an article this morning. I don't know when it ran originally, but it was from The Guardian, and they talked about how in the UK the average length of time, maybe not the average, but a person over 50 who's unemployed could expect to be unemployed for 2 years before they found another job. And what I've seen here is that number is closer to 6 months, or maybe 6 to 8 months. So it's a lot shorter here, but still it's a lot longer for old people than it is for the general work population.
Yeah, and what that Guardian report is, I don't think it's right now, but it wasn't that long ago, but it's still as relevant now. It's absolutely relevant now, and unfortunately, it almost in people's mindsets, or an individual looking to get back into work, they're almost now not expecting to get back into work. So, in terms of barriers that exist in that recruitment environment, in terms of whether that's bias discrimination at agency level or company level, it's having a negative effect on the candidate themselves of having the energy and the motivation to actually go and search for work and feel confident that they'll be fairly considered amongst the other applicants.
And that's the key thing, is what you said, being fairly considered, and that's one of the big hurdles I think that we need to overcome, is that they're not fairly considered. They're kind of dismissed out of hand, and that's, I think, where the real problem is. And from looking at the other side of the spectrum, is that older workers have to realize that they're probably not going to earn as much money as they did in their last position. And if they've worked in a large corporation all their lives, there's a good chance that they're not going to go back to a large corporation, and they have to be able to be open to working in smaller companies, startup companies, even nonprofit organizations, or even starting their own businesses. So they have to be open and be receptive to a lot of different options. And the good news is that there are a lot of options for it.
And in some ways, that's, if you like, a responsibility that needs to be owned by the individual, isn't it? So it's not all on employees, it's not all on the candidates. It's about having a common understanding that there are opportunities available to everyone on a fair and equal footing, but actually the individual, as you describe, needs to be maybe a little bit more open-minded as well about where they can use their skills, how they can use their experience, the type of organisation they can, present that working opportunity.
And the good news is that if you start looking at some of these other options, those employers may be more willing to hire an older employee. Nonprofit organizations, they love the kind of expertise that an older person can bring, and startup companies too.
Yeah, and just on that actually, Jim, something we've noticed as well during the pandemic, and as organizations look at ways of transitioning out of the pandemic in terms of being sustainable and still viable as an organization, as a company, is that I think because of everything that's gone on within the pandemic, and there's been lots of support for frontline workers, a lot more appreciation for the really important roles a lot of people play, and a lot of those roles are on the lower end of the pay scale as well. But organisations that show purpose, that display a good commitment to a diverse and inclusive workforce are the ones that people want to do business with. So it's another value, if you like, and another benefit that organisations, in considering an age diverse workforce, the value it can bring is actually how their organisation is perceived by the marketplace as an organisation with purpose, with strong values, strong social values and interaction, and giving all age groups, including older workers, a chance to get back into a working environment.
And it's part of the company's culture that they're very open to all the isms, and it's also part of their branding too, that they're a very open-minded company, and they're willing to talk to any potential employer who they think will help them.
Yeah, and so that leads us nicely into sort of the next sort of question or conversation piece I wanted to raise, Jim, about so we see how organisations could benefit, whether it's, as you say, being aware and considerate of all the isms, because of situations like the international pandemic we've seen, but barriers we still need to be removed to enable those jobs to be made available to this wider group of potential candidates. So,
or at least be considered for them and not dismissed out of hand.
So in terms of that, if you like, the struggle for the older candidates still to be considered, it's still there right now, isn't it?
Oh yeah, in a lot of different areas. You mentioned earlier, I think, the whole idea of the myths that are associated with older workers, and those are still very much alive and flourishing in some companies. This whole idea that people over the age of 55 or 60 are technologically incompetent. That's one of the big ones, and that's one of the biggest falsehoods, I think. I remember reading a few years ago that the fastest growing age group on Facebook was 55 and above. So I mean, that may have been true 15 or 20 years ago, but I don't think it's true anymore.
I think a lot of
we may not be as up to date and as technologically proficient or capable as somebody in their 30s or even 40s, but that doesn't mean that we're incapable either.
No. I think a lot of the big tech firms with Apple, Samsung, these companies are now 40 years plus in existence. So there's a lot of people of an age that have grown up with that technology and been learning, developing along the way. And I would throw in as well, as part of the Champion program, we encourage organisations to showcase their jobs through our media channels to reach a different demographic. And we placed a 62-year-old Java developer. So these guys are out there and with a lot to offer. And it absolutely. And it just showed that an organisation that were not finding the right skill set within their traditional channels of recruitment when they had the opportunity to look outside of that, absolutely found the right person, and not just with the technical competence, but some of those softer skills as well. That again, a lot of organisations talk to us about the value of the softer attributes that certain people can bring to the workforce as well.
Yeah, working with getting along with co-workers, getting the most out of co-workers, and that list kind of goes on, and that's one of the things that older workers, the experience of older workers, really kind of shines, if you will. And the old line is, you can't Google experience. There's only one way to get it, and you have to live it.
And there's one technology company that we've worked with who were completely worried about losing that legacy knowledge and know-how, because a lot of that legacy knowledge helped resolve and solve questions and solutions for new product development. So mitigate a lot of the issues that may be faced through the new design, through continuing to have those skills, and redeploy it in different ways within an organisation. So as well as recruitment, it's about retaining those skills. So an organisation, hangs on to that experience, and really adds value, and that's where you can get real good sharing between age groups as well within a workforce.
It's just so much more insight. That they've lived through, ups and downs before. I was seeing something recently. It kind of piqued my interest, where, we've never seen this before. This is unprecedented. Well, no, that's not unprecedented. It's happened before. If you've been around long enough, you know that you can experience those things.
Absolutely. Jim, in terms of we've talked about some of the challenges and issues, but also some of the benefits. In terms of, I'd like to bring this to a bit of a close. I'm conscious of time. But we could talk a lot longer now about each of these subjects, and this conversation and recording is supporting our new Making a Noise campaign, and I'll point to it there. And it's something that we talked about in terms of raising awareness, reinvigorating the messaging for age diversity, because with all the work that you've done and that we do, unfortunately, there's still those challenges and barriers to overcome. Yes. But in terms of, some action points, some signposting, as well as being, our age diversity forum partner in the US, you do some fantastic work on the employability side through Nifty 50s. Could you just give people an idea of how individuals can really benefit from that resource?
Well, everything we put in there, the basic question I always ask myself is this information, this article or this podcast or this video, whatever it happens to be, is this going to help my people get jobs? Is this going to help them find work somewhere? And by my people, I mean job seekers over the age of 50. Yeah. So, and because I found some pretty good articles targeted toward people over the age of 50 or 60, but I'm thinking, that's good, but it's not going to help anybody get a job. So everything is focused on getting a job, and the idea is to try to present as much, not just in terms of volume, but in terms of variety of information. We have information on resumes and interviews, and now video interviews. We've run, I think, 3 or 4 articles just in January about video interviews.
Yeah.
In fact, we ran something this morning, and the name of it, wait a minute, just skipped my mind. It's called, when you're doing a program like ours, and if you're doing a job interview and you're from home, there are other people in the house. You have dogs barking, you have landscapers outside. There's a thing called CRISP. And apparently what it does is it focuses your microphone on you, and it blocks out all this background.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a free version of it too. So those kinds of little tips we try to plug in as well. So
yeah, and we first met because I found Nifty 50s, and a lot of that stuff is based on US content, but I know, and you already mentioned, some of the content this week is from the UK in terms of the Guardian and further afield. But what I saw was information and support and guidance that was as applicable here in the UK as it was in the US. And I think this is, in terms of our discussions about the Making a Noise campaign, and I'll point to that again, is that these are very common challenges, And again, come back to the title of our discussion today, challenges without boundaries. I think age diversity, the challenges, but the opportunities as well, are very common in all four corners of the globe. And so what we're trying to do, you and I, Jim, through this type of discussion and conversation, is raise the profile and awareness of how organisations and individuals can benefit, but also give them some practical support and help. And that the nifty 50 stuff that comes out 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesdays, on Fridays, is a fantastic resource for individuals. And if I may complement that with the Champion Age Diversity Programme available through the Age Diversity Forum, that's an opportunity for organisations and employers to engage, to demonstrate that commitment to age diversity, to begin to recognise what benefits and values can be had. So it's beyond just a policy statement. It's a change of behaviour, change of culture, change of good practice, and they can wear the Champion Age Diversity badge. But we talked about intangible benefits earlier. Just by showcasing themselves as a Champion Age Diversity employer, immediately that gives more confidence and engagement to their own staff, but also the perception and purpose it shows to the outside world is a really positive one, and we see some really good economic benefit in that regard. So I just want to say thank you again, Jim, for the chance to have this conversation. This is our first one under the Making a Noise banner, but it's not going to be our last.
And we've barely just scratched the surface.
Absolutely, and these topics are relevant now. I'm sure they'll continue to be relevant as we go forward with the programme. But we're going to continue raising the profile. Together, we have created this new international journal under the Making a Noise banner, and that first one was released earlier this month. We've got the next one where this video will be shown in the next week or so coming out, so we'll be pointing people towards that. But I think the message from both us, Jim, if you don't mind me saying, is to really ask everyone to get involved in some fashion, seek out support, help, guidance, and as organisations, we're here to help that process. Right.
We're here to help the older people find work, and we want to show to or demonstrate to the employers of the world that there's a lot of value in those older people.
Yeah.
Don't sweep them under the rug.
Exactly. And a phrase that we're using within the journal, and I've started using on my emails actually, is an invitation to everyone watching this to the journal. Make a noise about age diversity. So on that note, thank you very much, Jim. Really appreciate it. And until next time, we'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Jim.